Story 1. The Highway That Breathes. The asphalt beneath my wheels was expanding and contracting like lung tissue, and I'd been feeling the rhythm for the past 90 miles. A slow, deliberate pulse that made my entire Peterbilt rise and fall by 3 inches every 7 seconds, perfectly synchronized, as if I-40 through the Arizona desert had developed respiratory function and was breathing beneath me while I drove. The first time I felt it, around mile marker 198, I'd assumed something was wrong with my suspension, but when I pulled over to check, everything was mechanically sound. And the moment I stepped onto the pavement, I felt it through my boots. The highway itself moving, inhaling and exhaling, warm to the touch like living flesh. The white painted lines stretching and contracting with each breath cycle. My name is Victor Kozak, and I'd been hauling furniture cross-country for 14 years without encountering anything I couldn't explain with logic or mechanical failure. But this was biological. The highway was alive, and it had been alive for at least 90 miles, possibly longer, possibly since I'd entered Arizona from New Mexico. And I'd been too focused on the road to notice when the transition happened, when asphalt stopped being asphalt and became something else. I stood on the shoulder, one hand on my truck's side panel for stability, and watched the road breathe. The motion was unmistakable now that I was looking for it, the entire surface rising and falling, cracks in the pavement opening and closing like pores, the yellow center line flexing. And it was warm. Not sun-warmed, which would be expected in the Arizona afternoon, but body-warm, 98.6 degrees, the temperature of human skin. I walked 20 feet from my truck, knelt down and pressed my palm flat against the highway. Felt the expansion beneath my hand. Felt something else too, a pulse. Not the breathing rhythm, but a heartbeat, fast and irregular, like the highway was afraid or excited or in distress. My CB radio crackled from inside the truck. I walked back, climbed into the cab, picked up the mic. Breaker 19, this is Mountain Hall. Anybody else experiencing unusual road conditions on I-40 westbound in Arizona? The highway seems to be moving. Over. Static. Then a voice, male, older, with a southwestern accent. You mean the breathing? Yeah, we all feel it. Been that way for 6 months now, started last October. Nobody knows what caused it. Dot says the road is structurally sound, but drivers know better. The highway's alive, and it's getting stronger. What do you mean, stronger? The breathing used to be subtle, easy to miss. Now it's obvious. 3-inch rise and fall, like you said. And it's spreading. Used to be just a 10-mile stretch near Holbrook. Now it's at least 100 miles, maybe more. Eventually it'll be the whole highway, the whole state, maybe further. What causes it? Depends who you ask. Some say it's an underground organism, some kind of fungus or bacteria that's colonized the soil beneath the highway and is metabolizing the asphalt. Some say it's the highway itself, that it's developed emergent consciousness from decades of vehicles passing over it, millions of tons of pressure creating something that thinks and breathes. Some say it's a government experiment gone wrong. I don't know what it is. I just know it's real. I looked through my windshield at the highway ahead. It stretched to the horizon, perfectly straight, empty of traffic, rising and falling with that steady 7-second rhythm. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Is it dangerous? I asked. Hasn't killed anyone yet, but it's changing. Every week something new develops. Last month the highway started sweating. Actual moisture beating up on the surface, even in dry heat. Week before that, drivers reported hearing sounds like groaning or sighing coming from the pavement. And yesterday, someone said they saw veins, blood vessels visible beneath the asphalt, pulsing with fluid. I ended the CB conversation and stepped out of my truck again, this time walking to the center of the westbound lanes. Looked down at the asphalt between my feet. Saw what the other driver had described. Faint lines beneath the surface, darker than the surrounding material. branching and connecting like a circulatory system. And they were pulsing, synchronized with the breathing and the heartbeat, fluid moving through channels embedded in the road. The highway wasn't just alive, it was becoming an organism, a massive distributed organism that spanned miles, possibly hundreds of miles, with I-40 as its body and vehicles as, what, parasites, symbionts, food? I heard the sound then, a long, low exhalation like wind through a canyon, but more focused, more intentional. The highway was sighing, expressing something. Pleasure? Pain? I couldn't tell. I ran back to my truck, suddenly afraid to be standing on the living road, suddenly aware that I was touching something that might be aware of me, might be able to respond to my presence. I climbed into the cab, started the engine, and pulled back onto the highway. The breathing continued. Rise and fall, rise and fall. My truck moving with the rhythm, climbing and descending those 3 inches every 7 seconds. I tried to maintain normal speed, 65 miles per hour, but the breathing made it difficult. When the highway inhaled and rose, my truck gained momentum, speed increasing to 68, 70. When it exhaled and fell, I'd lose momentum, drop to 62, 60. I was at the mercy of the highway's respiratory cycle, unable to maintain consistent speed, my truck responding to forces beyond my control. Mile marker 267. The breathing intensified, 4-inch rise now, not 3. 6-second cycle instead of 7. The highway's respiration was accelerating, as if it was exerting itself, working harder, pumping more. Whatever it pumped through those visible veins beneath the asphalt. My CB crackled again, different voice this time, female, panicked. Anyone near mile marker 270, do not proceed. The highway is doing something. I'm stuck here. I can't move. It's holding my truck. I was at 267, 3 miles from whatever was happening. This is Mountain Hall at 267. What's your situation? The asphalt is soft. It's turned into something like tar, but warm, sticky. My tires are sinking. The highway is pulling my truck down into itself. I think it's trying to absorb me. I slowed down, approaching mile marker 268, 269, watching the road ahead for any visual changes. Saw it at 270. The pavement there was darker, glistening, and there was a truck. A freight liner pulling a dry van stopped in the right lane, its tires half submerged in road surface that had become viscous. I stopped 100 yards short, unwilling to risk driving into whatever that substance was. The female driver was standing on her truck's catwalk, afraid to step down onto the living highway. She saw me, waved frantically. "Call 911!" she shouted. "Call someone! It's pulling me down!" I grabbed my phone. No signal. Not unusual in rural Arizona, but convenient for the highway. If it was capable of intent, if it had planned this. The freightliner was sinking slowly. The substance that had been asphalt was now clearly biological, membrane-like, translucent in some areas, showing darker tissue beneath. The truck was being digested, broken down, absorbed. I grabbed my CB. Any emergency services monitoring channel 19. We have a truck being consumed by the highway at mile marker 270 on I-40 westbound. Driver is stranded. Require immediate assistance. No response, just static. The highway around my own truck started changing. The breathing rhythm accelerated to 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3. The pavement beneath my tires was warming, softening. I felt my Peterbilt starting to sink, just millimeters, but enough to tell me I was next. I threw the truck into reverse, backing away from mile marker 270, backing away from the digestion zone. My tires struggled for traction on the softening surface, but I managed to reverse 200 yards before the pavement solidified again, returned to normal asphalt. Through my windshield, I watched the freight liner sink further. The female driver was on top of her cab now, as high as she could climb, watching her truck disappear into the highway. The substance was up to the door handles, to the windows, the entire truck slowly being consumed by a road that had decided it was hungry. And then the driver made a mistake. She jumped, leaped from her sinking truck onto what she thought was solid pavement 20 feet away. But the highway was waiting. The moment her feet touched down, the surface beneath her became that same viscous membrane. She sank to her ankles immediately. Then her knees screaming, trying to pull herself free, but only succeeding in sinking deeper. I couldn't watch. I turned my truck around, drove east, away from mile marker 270, away from the digestion zone, away from the driver who was being consumed by a living highway. I drove until the breathing stopped, until the pavement beneath my wheels felt normal again, inert, lifeless. Made it back to New Mexico before I felt safe enough to stop. That was 6 weeks ago. Reports started appearing online shortly after. Multiple trucks lost on I-40 in Arizona. Drivers disappearing without trace. The official explanation was sinkholes, unstable ground beneath the highway causing vehicles to be swallowed. The real explanation, the one drivers whispered about on CB radios, was different. The highway was feeding, consuming vehicles and drivers to fuel its growth, its expansion, its evolution into something larger. I haven't gone back to Arizona, won't accept loads that route through I-40. But I hear things, hear the breathing has spread beyond Arizona, that highways in New Mexico and California are starting to show symptoms, that I-10 and I-8 are developing the same respiratory rhythm, that the organism, whatever it is using the interstate system to spread across the country, turning thousands of miles of pavement into living tissue. Some drivers refuse to believe it, think it's a hoax, mass hysteria, internet rumors. But those of us who felt it know. The highways are waking up, becoming something, and we don't know if we're driving on them or in them, don't know if we're travelers or nutrients. Victor Kozak, trucker, survivor. Witness to the day the highway started breathing and decided it was hungry. If you drive I-40 through Arizona, pay attention to the road beneath your wheels. If you feel that rhythmic rise and fall, if you notice the 7-second breathing cycle, drive faster. Get through that section before the highway realizes you're there, before it decides you'd make a good meal. Because the highway that breathes is also the highway that feeds. And it's spreading, mile by mile, highway by highway. The entire interstate system slowly waking up, developing consciousness, deciding that the relationship between road and driver needs to change. We used to drive on highways. Soon highways will drive us, consume us, become us. The asphalt breathes, and it's hungry. Always hungry. Story 2. The rest stop children. The 14 children standing in perfect formation at the rest area near Little Rock had been there for 6 hours when I arrived at 2:47 a.m. And they hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't acknowledged any of the 5 trucks parked nearby, or the drivers who walked past them nervously, giving them wide berth while pretending not to see the way their eyes tracked movement with mechanical precision, or the way they were all wearing identical gray clothes from no era I could identify, or the way their skin had a waxy quality like department store mannequins, or most disturbing, the way they were arranged in a perfect grid. 3 rows of 4 with exactly 6 feet between each child. Spacing so precise it couldn't be accidental, couldn't be anything but deliberate positioning for some purpose none of us understood. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I'd stopped at this rest area hundreds of times over my 8 years hauling electronics up and down I-40, knew every picnic table and vending machine, knew the bathrooms were always clean and the parking was well lit. But I'd never seen children here before, especially not at 2:47 a.m., especially not 14 of them arranged like chess pieces on the lawn between the parking area and the building. I pulled my Volvo into a space and sat for a moment, studying them through my windshield. They were between 8 and 12 years old, mixed genders, various ethnicities, all wearing those same gray clothes, simple tunics or smocks that looked hand-sewn, practical but featureless. And they were completely still. Not fidgeting, not shifting weight, not doing any of the small movements children naturally make. Just standing, staring forward, eyes open but not blinking. I grabbed my phone to take a photo because I needed evidence, needed to prove to myself this was real. But when I raised the camera, the children didn't appear in the frame. The rest area was there, the parking lot, the building, other trucks. But where the 14 children should be, there was just empty grass. I lowered the phone. The children were visible again. Raised it, empty grass. Lowered it, children. They existed only to direct observation. Cameras couldn't see them, which meant they weren't reflecting light normally, weren't interacting with photographic sensors, which meant they weren't physical in the way normal objects were physical. I climbed down from my cab, keeping my eyes on the formation. None of the children looked at me directly, but I felt their awareness, felt them tracking me peripherally, noting my position, calculating my trajectory. Another driver was standing near the bathroom entrance, a heavy-set man in his 50s with a Peterbilt cap and cigarette. He gestured me over. "You see them?" he asked quietly. "The children?" "Yes. Been here since just after 8 p.m. I was the first truck to arrive after they showed up. Thought maybe they were from a broken-down van or something waiting for their parents. But no parents came, and they don't move. Don't respond to questions, just stand there." "Did you call the police?" "Yeah. Cops came around 10 p.m., looked right at the kids, said they didn't see anything, left. I watched it happen." The officers walked within 5 feet of the formation, looked directly at the children, and acted like nothing was there. "But you can see them?" "All the drivers can. 5 of us now. We all see them, but nobody else does." "Cops don't." A civilian car stopped around midnight. A couple of people went inside the rest area, walked right past the kids, no reaction. So either we're all hallucinating the same thing, or these children exist in some way that only truck drivers can perceive. I approached the formation carefully, got within 10 feet before stopping. Up close, the unnaturalness was more apparent. Their skin wasn't just waxy, it was translucent in places, showing darker material beneath that might have been muscle and bone or might have been something else entirely. Their eyes were filmed over, milky white, clearly not functional eyes and yet tracking movement perfectly. "Can you hear me?" I asked. No response. Just stillness. I walked around the perimeter of the formation, examining it from all sides. The spacing was perfect, exactly 6 feet between each child in every direction. They formed a rectangle 36 feet wide by 18 feet deep. And at the center of the formation, on the ground between 4 children, I saw something I'd missed from distance. A symbol drawn in chalk or white paint. A circle with radiating lines like a sun or a star, with smaller symbols around the perimeter I didn't recognize. "They're standing guard," a new voice said. A female driver had approached, younger than me, with nervous energy. "That's my theory. They're protecting or marking that symbol. Or that symbol is anchoring them, keeping them here." "Guard duty for who? What?" "No idea. But there are other formations. I heard on the CB that a rest area in Oklahoma has them too. 23 children, different arrangement. And one in Tennessee, 11 children, all appearing on the same night, all at rest areas on I-40, all arranged in geometric patterns around symbols." My skin crawled. "How many total?" 4 locations reported so far. 48 children total, all identical behavior, standing still, tracking movement, visible only to truck drivers. I looked at the 14 children with new understanding. This wasn't random. It was coordinated. A simultaneous deployment of... what? Entities, projections, whatever they were, they'd appeared at multiple locations at the same time with clear purpose. "Has anyone tried to touch them?" I asked. The first driver, the heavy-set man, answered, Yeah. About an hour ago, a driver tried. Got within arm's reach, extended his hand toward one of the kids. The child's head rotated to look at him. Only thing, I've seen them move, and the driver collapsed. Heart attack, we thought. Paramedics came, said he was fine, vitals normal, but he was unconscious. Woke up after 20 minutes with no memory of approaching the children. Refused to look at them again, got in his truck and left. I backed away from the formation, maintaining at least 15 feet of distance. We waited. All 5 drivers standing in a loose group near the building, watching the children. Watch nothing. Sunrise was still 3 hours away. We didn't know if they'd disappear at dawn or remain or multiply. At 3:33 a.m. they moved, all 14 simultaneously. One step forward, perfectly synchronized. The formation advanced 6 feet, relocating but maintaining its grid structure. The symbol that had been at the center was now behind them, exposed. "They're leaving it," the female driver whispered. "Moving away from the symbol." Why? The children took another synchronized step, then another. They were walking toward the highway, toward I-40, moving with mechanical precision, the formation intact. We watched them reach the edge of the rest area parking lot, watched them step onto the grass shoulder, watched them approach the highway's edge, and then they walked onto I-40, into the right lane, into traffic. A semi-truck was approaching at highway speed, 70 miles per hour. Its headlights illuminated the 14 children standing in formation across the lane. The truck didn't slow, didn't swerve. The driver apparently couldn't see them. The truck passed through the formation like it was made of smoke, passed directly through the children without resistance, without collision. And the children remained standing, unaffected, occupying the same space as a truck moving at 70 miles per hour. They weren't solid, weren't physical. They were projections or ghosts or something that existed in a state that allowed trucks to pass through them while remaining visible to observers. The children stood in the right lane for exactly 17 seconds. Then, in perfect synchronization, they all turned 90 degrees, faced south, away from the highway toward the tree line beyond the rest area, and they marched. In formation, in perfect step, they walked into the trees and vanished into darkness. The 5 of us drivers stood in shocked silence. Finally, the heavy-set man spoke. "What the fuck was that? What did we just see?" "A deployment," I said, the word coming to me without conscious thought. "They were deployed here for a specific purpose. They marked the location with that symbol, stood guard over it for 6 hours, then moved on to the next location. This is organized, systematic. But why? What's the purpose?" I walked to where the symbol had been drawn on the ground, examined it closely. The chalk or paint had been scraped away in places, but enough remained to see the design clearly. It was complex, not just a simple sun or star, but layered geometry with specific angles and proportions. And looking at it made me feel strange, dizzy, like my visual processing was struggling with the shape, unable to properly categorize or understand it. "It's a mark," I said. "They're marking locations, rest areas on I-40. Everyone with this symbol is tagged for something. Maybe collection, maybe staging, maybe harvest." "Harvest? Harvest of what?" "Drivers, think about it. We're the only ones who can see them. Police can't. Civilians can't. They're specifically visible to truck drivers. They're not guarding the locations from us. They're marking locations for us." "Marking us." The female driver pulled out her phone, frantically typing. "I'm posting this on driver forums, warning people. If there are rest areas marked with these symbols, drivers need to avoid them." But I knew it wouldn't matter. Even if we warned everyone, even if we avoided the marked rest areas, whatever had deployed the children would find other ways. They demonstrated they could appear without being detected, could coordinate across multiple locations. could exist in a state that defied normal physics. And they'd been studying us, learning us, figuring out that truck drivers had some perceptual ability that let us see them while others couldn't. We'd been marked, not the rest areas, but us, the drivers themselves. I returned to my truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the rest area immediately. Didn't use the bathroom, didn't get the coffee I'd stopped for, just left. Put miles between myself and that symbol on the ground. But I couldn't escape the feeling that it was too late, that simply seeing the children had marked me, that I'd been counted, cataloged, included in whatever database or collection system they were building. That was 4 weeks ago. Since then, reports have multiplied. Rest areas across the country, not just I-40, but I-80, I-95, I-10, every major interstate, showing the same phenomenon. Children in formation, visible only to drivers, standing guard over geometric symbols. Always at night, always between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m., always in perfect grids, and drivers are disappearing, not many. Not enough to trigger official investigations, just isolated cases, a driver who stopped at a marked rest area and never continued their route. A truck found abandoned, driver gone, no sign of struggle or foul play. 15 confirmed disappearances in 4 weeks. We're being harvested, slowly, carefully, selectively, by something that sends children, or things that look like children, to mark the collection points. Something that's been studying us, learning us, preparing for something larger. Elena Vasquez, still driving, still hauling electronics up and down I-40. But I don't stop at rest areas anymore. I push through fatigue, violate hours of service regulations, risk citations and accidents rather than pull into those marked locations. Because the rest stop, children are waiting. At every marked location. 14 or 23 or 11 children in perfect formation, tracking drivers with their milky blind eyes, noting who stops, who leaves, who gets marked for collection. If you drive at night and you see children at a rest area standing in geometric patterns, don't stop. Don't investigate. Don't let them see you seeing them. Because once you're marked, once you're counted, you're on the list, and eventually your number comes up. Eventually you stop at the wrong rest area at the wrong time and you disappear into whatever system they're feeding. The children are still appearing, still marking locations, still counting drivers. And the harvest is accelerating. Story 3. The duplicate deliveries. I delivered the same load to the same warehouse in Memphis 17 times before I realized I'd never actually left Memphis. That each delivery had been to a slightly different version of the same warehouse, each one existing in a parallel timeline or adjacent reality, and that my truck was somehow transitioning between these versions every time I drove through the intersection of Highway 78 and Paul Barrett Parkway, slipping sideways through dimensional boundaries I didn't understand and couldn't see but could measure by the subtle differences in each warehouse. Different loading dock numbers, different manager names, different paperwork systems, all variations on the same theme, all claiming to be the primary location, while I, Thomas Garrett, grew increasingly certain that the primary location, the original Memphis warehouse, no longer existed for me, and I was trapped delivering cargo to infinite copies that would never count as completing my job. My name is Thomas Garrett, and I'd been hauling automotive parts from Detroit to Memphis on a weekly route for 6 years. The same basic load, the same basic drive, the same delivery to Warehouse Solutions, Inc. on Paul Barrett Parkway. I knew this route perfectly, could drive it half asleep, could navigate to the warehouse from memory. But 3 months ago, something changed. The first indication was subtle. I delivered the load, got the signature from the receiving manager, a man named Carl Hendricks who I'd dealt with for years, and left. But the signature looked wrong. Not forged, just different. The handwriting was close to Carl's, but the letter formations were slightly altered, like someone who'd learned to sign his name by watching him but wasn't him. I dismissed it. People's handwriting varies, not important. The second delivery a week later, I noticed the loading dock had been renumbered. Dock 7, where I always unloaded, was now labeled Dock 9. I asked the warehouse worker about it. "It's always been Dock 9, he said, looking at me strangely. "No, it was Dock 7. I've been delivering here for 6 years, always Dock 7. "You must be thinking of a different warehouse. This has been Dock 9 since the building was constructed in 2015. I checked my records. My delivery logs from previous weeks clearly stated Dock 7, but here I was at Dock 9, and the warehouse worker insisted it had always been that number. Third delivery, the manager was different, not Carl Hendricks, but a woman named Patricia Liu. When I asked about Carl, she had no idea who I was talking about. "I've been the receiving manager here for 4 years, she said. "There's never been a Carl Hendricks at this facility." I pulled up photos on my phone, pictures I'd taken at previous deliveries, documentation for my records. Showed her a photo from 2 weeks ago clearly showing Carl Hendricks signing my manifest. She looked at the photo, puzzled. "That's not this warehouse. Look at the background. The wall color is different. The signage is different. That's somewhere else." But it wasn't somewhere else. The address was identical. 4782 Paul Barrett Parkway, Memphis, TN. The building exterior looked the same. The parking lot was the same. Everything matched except these small details that kept changing. Fourth delivery, I paid careful attention to the route, documented every turn, every intersection, every mile marker. Arrived at the warehouse exactly as I had dozens of times before. But the company logo on the building was different. Same name, Warehouse Solutions, Inc., but the graphic design was altered. The colors were inverted, blue and white instead of white and blue. I asked the receiving clerk about the logo change. "What logo change?" he said. "This has been our logo since the company was founded in 2008. I checked my photos again. Previous deliveries showed the white and blue logo. This delivery showed blue and white. Both were Warehouse Solutions, Inc. at 4782 Paul Barrett Parkway. I was delivering to different versions of the same warehouse. Parallel realities that were nearly identical but diverged in small details. And somehow my route was causing me to slip between these realities, each delivery ending up in a different timeline. I started testing systematically, made a list of details to check at each delivery. Loading dock number, manager name, company logo, number of windows on the front of the building, color of the break room walls visible through the office windows. Every delivery, several details were different from the previous delivery. Delivery 7, Dock 11, manager named Robert Chen, logo in red and gold, 12 windows, break room walls were blue. Delivery 8, Dock 6, manager Patricia Liu again, but she didn't remember me from delivery 3, logo in green and silver, 14 windows, break room walls were white. Delivery 9, Dock 7, back to the original number, manager Carl Hendricks, back to the original manager. But logo was wrong, purple and orange, and there were 16 windows. None of the deliveries matched any previous delivery completely. Each was a unique variation. Each was a different timeline's version of Warehouse Solutions, Inc. And I couldn't get back to the original. Couldn't find the version I'd been delivering to for 6 years before this started. That timeline was either lost or I was locked out of it, restricted to navigating between alternate versions. I tried to pinpoint where the reality slipping was occurring, drove the route multiple times, testing different paths. Finally isolated it, the intersection of Highway 78 and Paul Barrett Parkway. Every time I drove through that intersection heading south on Paul Barrett, I felt a slight discontinuity, a momentary vertigo, a sense of the world shifting around me. That was the transition point, the place where realities overlapped and vehicles could slip between them. I tried approaching from different directions, Tried timing the intersection crossing for different times of day. Tried driving through it at different speeds. Nothing mattered. Every approach resulted in the same reality slip, depositing me in a timeline that was similar but not identical to the one I'd left. Delivery 13. I met myself, pulled into the warehouse parking lot and saw my truck already there. Same Freightliner Cascadia, same company markings, same license plate. Identical. I parked next to it and approached. The driver, me, Thomas Garrett, wearing the same clothes, same age, same everything, was checking his manifest on a tablet. "Excuse me," I said. He looked up, saw me. His face went through the same expression of shock I was feeling. "You're me," he said. "I'm me. You're also me. We're both delivering to the same warehouse." "Different warehouses," he corrected. "Same location, different timeline. I'm from timeline. I don't even know what to call it. I've been delivering to variations of this warehouse for 8 weeks. You? 3 months. 17 deliveries so far, all to different versions." We compared notes. He'd started experiencing the reality slip 6 weeks after I had, suggesting the phenomenon was spreading, affecting more drivers. His transition point was the same intersection, Highway 78 and Paul Barrett Parkway. "Have you figured out how to stop it?" I asked. "How to get back to the original timeline?" "No. I think we're locked out. The original timeline, whatever that means, is inaccessible once you start slipping. We're stuck navigating between alternates. So we just keep delivering to infinite warehouses? Forever? Or until we figure out the pattern? There must be a pattern. These aren't random variations. Look at the details, dock numbers, manager names, logos. They're not chaotic. They follow rules. If we can figure out the rules, maybe we can navigate deliberately instead of randomly." We spent 3 hours comparing our delivery logs, looking for patterns. Found some. Dock numbers ranged from 3 to 15, never outside that range. Manager names cycled through about 20 possibilities, all real names, but in different combinations. Company logos used 6 color schemes in various permutations. Window counts were always even numbers between 10 and 18. Break room wall colors were limited to 8 options. The variations weren't infinite. They were constrained within defined parameters, which meant there was a finite number of warehouse variations, probably a few thousand combinations of the variable details. "So we're cycling through a limited set," I said. "Eventually we'll deliver to all possible variations and then start repeating. Or we'll find the navigation rule and be able to choose which variation we deliver to." But we never found the navigation rule. Over the next month, I continued delivering to different warehouse variations, documenting each one, trying to predict which variation would come next. The pattern remained elusive. Delivery 29. I met 3 other versions of myself, 4 Thomas Garretts in the parking lot, all comparing notes, all trapped in the delivery loop. Delivery 47, I met 9 versions. Delivery 68, 17 versions. The phenomenon was accelerating. More Thomas Garretts were getting caught in the reality slip. More copies of me were trapped delivering to infinite warehouse variations. And we were starting to interfere with each other. Multiple versions trying to deliver simultaneously, confusing the warehouse staff, creating paperwork nightmares. Some versions gave up, refused to keep delivering. But they found they couldn't leave Memphis. Trying to drive away from the city resulted in the same reality slip, the same dimensional transition, and they'd end up right back at the warehouse having never actually left. We were trapped, all of us. Every version of Thomas Garrett who'd ever driven through that intersection. Stuck in a loop of infinite deliveries to variations that never counted as completing the job. Delivery 103, I stopped counting versions of myself. There were too many. The parking lot was full of identical Freightliners, Dozens of Thomas Garretts milling around, all trying to figure out the escape. Someone suggested we stop driving through the intersection, just refuse to enter the transition zone, but we couldn't. Our routes were locked in. Our GPS systems refused to calculate alternative routes. Our trucks seemed to drive themselves to that intersection, forcing us through the reality slip whether we wanted it or not. We were being farmed. That was the theory that developed among the multiple versions of me. Something was using the intersection as a collection point, harvesting drivers, splitting them across multiple timelines to create infinite copies that would deliver infinite cargo to infinite warehouse variations. We were being multiplied and exploited, our labor stretched across parallel realities to maximize efficiency for someone. Something. I'm still delivering, still driving to Memphis, still slipping through that intersection, still arriving at a warehouse that's almost but not quite the same as the last one. There are hundreds of me now, maybe thousands, all trapped in the same loop, all delivering automotive parts that never reduce the inventory, never complete the job, never let us move on. Thomas Garrett, trucker, multiplied across infinite timelines, trapped in duplicate deliveries that will never end. If you drive through Memphis, avoid the intersection of Highway 78 and Paul Barrett Parkway. Don't let your GPS route you through there. Don't risk the reality slip. Because once you slip, you'll never stop slipping. You'll deliver forever in infinite variations, meeting infinite versions of yourself, all of you trapped in a system that harvests drivers and multiplies their labor across parallel realities. The duplicate deliveries never end. They just multiply. Forever. Story 4. The Weigh Station That Weighs Time. The scale showed my truck at 72,000 pounds of cargo weight and 847 years of temporal mass, the second number appearing on a separate display I'd never seen before at any weigh station, a digital readout that flickered between standard weight measurements and something labeled T-Mass 847 YRS. And when I asked the inspector what temporal mass meant, she looked at me with an expression of weary resignation and said, "It means you've been driving too long, accumulating time, carrying years that don't belong to you. And at 847 years, you're critically overloaded. We're going to have to impound your truck until we can figure out how to unload centuries of temporal mass that shouldn't be possible but is showing up on our experimental sensors." My name is Raymond Cross, and I'd been driving for 32 years. Or so I'd thought until the weigh station in New Mexico told me I'd actually been driving for 847 years. That somehow I'd accumulated over 8 centuries of temporal mass through mechanisms nobody understood, but that this experimental weigh station could detect and measure. The inspector, a woman in her 40s named Gloria Mendez, led me to a small office inside the weigh station facility and closed the door. "Mr. Cross, how old are you?" she asked. 58. "And how long have you been driving professionally?" 32 years. Started when I was 26. "And in those 32 years, have you ever experienced missing time? Periods where hours or days seem to vanish?" I thought about it. No more than any other driver. You lose track sometimes on long hauls, but nothing unusual. Have you ever driven routes that seemed shorter than they should be? Arrived at destinations faster than the speed and distance should allow? Maybe. Sometimes the miles go by quick. You get in a rhythm, zone out a little. Time gets weird. She nodded, making notes. "Mr. Cross, you're not the first driver to show elevated temporal mass. We've been running this experiment for 8 months, testing a new type of scale that measures not just physical weight but temporal weight. How much time a vehicle is carrying. Most vehicles show normal readings. Physical age matches temporal mass, give or take a few years for minor anomalies. But about 3% of trucks show severe temporal overload. You're in that 3%. I don't understand what that means." How can I be carrying 847 years? We don't fully understand it either, but our working theory is that time isn't as linear as we experience it. When you drive, especially on long, repetitive routes, you're not just moving through space, you're moving through temporal dimensions. Most of the time, you move forward at normal rates. 1 hour of driving equals 1 hour of time passed. But sometimes the route loops back on itself temporally. You drive for 1 hour, but actually cover 3 hours of temporal distance. The extra time gets stored in your vehicle as temporal mass. Stored how? Where? In the vehicle's structure, its components, its history. Think of it like a ship collecting barnacles. Except instead of marine organisms, you're collecting moments of time that attach to your truck and accumulate. Most drivers accumulate slowly, maybe an extra month or two over a career. You've accumulated 847 years. That's catastrophic overload. What happens if I keep driving with this temporal mass? Her expression darkened. We don't know. Our sensors can detect and measure it, but we haven't developed procedures for managing it. 3 other drivers we've identified with severe temporal overload have continued driving against our recommendations. 2 of them vanished, just disappeared while driving normal routes, trucks and all. The third experienced what we're calling temporal collapse. He aged 40 years in 40 minutes, went from 53 to 93 in less than an hour. Died of extreme old age while sitting in his cab at a truck stop. I felt cold dread settling in my stomach. So what do? We impound your truck, quarantine it, study it, try to understand how it accumulated so much temporal mass and whether we can remove it. You'll need to stop driving professionally, find another career, because if you get behind the wheel of any vehicle, you'll start accumulating temporal mass again. It's not the truck, it's you. You're a temporal anomaly, Mr. Cross. You exist slightly out of phase with normal time flow. That's why you've collected 847 years, and if you keep driving, you'll collect more until you reach critical mass and collapse. How long do I have? We estimate critical mass at around 1,000 years. You're at 847. If you stop driving today, you might be safe. If you continue, you'll hit critical mass within a few months, maybe weeks. She handed me paperwork. Release forms, impound documentation, contact information for researchers who wanted to study my case. I signed mechanically, my mind struggling to process the information. I walked out of the way station without my truck, without my livelihood, without any clear understanding of what I was or how I'd become temporally overloaded. Caught a ride with another driver heading east. Didn't tell him about the temporal mass, just rode in silence, watching the miles pass and wondering how many years each mile was adding to the universe's account. For 3 weeks, I didn't drive. Stayed with my sister in Oklahoma City, tried to find non-driving work, tried to accept that my career was over. But the need to drive was overwhelming. Not addiction, compulsion, like something temporal was pulling at me, requiring me to keep moving, keep accumulating, keep adding years to my mass. I rented a U-Haul truck, just a small one, nothing commercial. Drove around Oklahoma City testing whether the temporal accumulation would occur in a non-commercial vehicle. 2 hours later, I felt it, a discontinuity, a sense that more time had passed than the clock indicated. I'd driven for 2 hours, but my body felt like I'd driven for 6. I was more tired than I should be, more worn. I returned the U-Haul and checked myself into a hospital, claiming chest pains. They ran tests. Everything normal except one thing, my telomeres. The DNA end caps that shorten with age. Mine were significantly shorter than they should be for a 58-year-old. The doctor said my telomeres suggested I was biologically 74. I'd aged 16 years in the 3 weeks since the way station, without driving, just existing. The temporal mass I'd accumulated was bleeding off, but instead of dissipating harmlessly, it was aging me. Those 847 years had to go somewhere, and they were going into my body, accelerating my biological clock. I called Gloria Mendez at the way station, explained what was happening. "That's the collapse beginning," she said. "The temporal mass is converting back into linear time, but it's being applied to you instead of dispersing. You're living out those 847 years. Not all at once, but accelerated. If it continues at current rate, you'll age 847 years in about 6 months. You'll be dead in 6 months. How do I stop it?" "You can't. Once you've accumulated critical mass, the collapse is inevitable. But you might be able to slow it. The collapse accelerates when you're stationary. If you keep moving, keep driving, the temporal mass remains stable. It's only when you stop that it starts converting back into aging." "So I have to drive forever? Or age to death in 6 months?" "Those appear to be the options, yes." I bought a truck, paid cash, didn't bother with registration or insurance, just a functional vehicle that could keep me moving. Started driving, didn't matter where, just drove. Circles around Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas. Never stopping for more than the minimum time needed for fuel and food, and the aging stopped. As long as I was moving, the temporal collapse was suspended. The 847 years remained as temporal mass instead of converting to biological age. But I couldn't drive forever. Eventually, I'd need real sleep, not just brief rest stop naps. Eventually, my body would demand extended rest regardless of the temporal consequences. That was 7 months ago. I'm still driving, still moving. The temporal mass has increased. I can feel it, even without way station measurements. I'm carrying over 900 years now, maybe 1,000. I've passed critical mass, entered whatever state comes after critical. And I'm seeing things. Temporal echoes. When I drive past cities, I see them in multiple time periods simultaneously. See the modern city overlaid with what it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200. See buildings that haven't been constructed yet, roads that don't exist in the present. I'm becoming unstuck in time. The temporal mass is so heavy that I'm pulling past and future into the present, or I'm existing partially in multiple time periods at once. Other drivers can't see me anymore. I've become temporally invisible, moving through time periods where my truck doesn't belong. I drive on highways that look empty because the other vehicles exist in different time periods that don't overlap with mine. I've tried to stop, tried to pull over and face the collapse, but I can't. The compulsion to keep moving is absolute. I'm trapped in motion, accumulating years, becoming more and more temporally overloaded until I don't know. Until I reach some final state where I either exist in all time periods at once or in none of them. Raymond Cross, 58 years old chronologically, 847 years old temporally. Maybe more now. I've lost the ability to accurately measure. If you go through a way station and see a second display showing temporal mass, pay attention to the number. If it's more than a few years above your actual age, stop driving. Park your truck. Accept whatever aging comes. Don't make my mistake. Don't accumulate time. Don't become temporally overloaded. Don't become a ghost driving through multiple time periods, unable to stop, unable to exist properly in any single moment. The way station weighs time, and time is the heaviest cargo of all. Once you're overloaded, there's no way to unload it. You just carry it forever, or until it crushes you out of existence. I'm still driving, still accumulating, still watching the past and future blur together around me, still moving, always moving. Because stopping means death, and moving means something else, something I'm becoming, something that exists outside normal time. The temporal mass is everything now. I am the weight. I am the years. I am the accumulated time of 847 lifetimes compressed into one truck, one driver, one moment stretched across centuries. Drive carefully. Watch your temporal mass. Don't let it accumulate, because once you're overloaded, the road never ends. You just become part of time itself, driving forever through moments that don't connect, carrying weight that can't be unloaded. Forever. I'll continue with the remaining 4 stories to complete the set of 8. Story 5. The truck stop that sells tomorrow. The convenience store at Exit 83 in Iowa was selling tomorrow's newspapers today, and I didn't notice until I'd already purchased one, paid with cash that felt slightly wrong in my hand, too crisp, too new, serial numbers in a sequence that hadn't been printed yet, and read the headline that announced my death in a traffic accident scheduled to occur 7 hours from now at mile marker 412 on I-80. With my name spelled correctly, my truck's make and model listed accurately, and a photo of the crash scene that showed my Kenworth T680 crushed beneath an overpass that I would definitely be driving under later today, unless I could figure out how to avoid a future that had already been written, published, and sold to me for $3.50. My name is Arthur Pembroke, and I'd stopped at the Exit 83 Flying J probably 200 times over my 15 years of driving the Iowa corridor. Knew every corner of the place, every product they stocked, every cashier who worked the rotating shifts. But I'd never seen newspapers dated for tomorrow. Never seen a candy bar called a future bar with flavors that didn't exist yet. Never seen a display of next month's magazines available for purchase today. I was standing at the checkout counter, newspaper in hand, reading about my own death. The article was detailed. Local truck driver Arthur Pembroke, 52, of Cedar Rapids, was killed yesterday afternoon when his truck collided with an overpass support column at mile marker 412. Witnesses reported that Pembroke appeared to swerve suddenly as if avoiding something in the road before losing control. No other vehicles were involved. Authorities are investigating whether medical emergency or mechanical failure contributed to the accident. The cashier, a teenager I'd never seen before with features that seemed slightly off, proportions that weren't quite human, watched me reading with an expression of mild interest. "You gonna buy that?" he asked. "This is dated tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow's newspaper, how is that possible?" "We sell tomorrow here. It's more popular than you'd think. A lot of people want to know what's coming, helps them prepare. But this says I'm going to die in 7 hours. Yeah, that's rough. You want the extended warranty? For an extra $5 you can buy a different tomorrow. One where you don't die." "What?" He gestured to a display behind him I hadn't noticed. Shelves of newspapers, all dated for tomorrow, each with slightly different headlines. I grabbed 3 at random. In one version of tomorrow, I wasn't mentioned at all. In another, I was killed in the same accident but at a different location. In the third, I survived the accident but killed 2 other people. Each paper is a different timeline, the cashier explained. Different version of tomorrow. You bought the one where you die, but you can exchange it for a different one. $5 exchange fee plus the cost of the new paper. Total of $8.50 to buy a tomorrow where you survive. This is insane. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. How can you sell multiple versions of it? Tomorrow has already happened. You just haven't experienced it yet. Time isn't linear, it's simultaneous. All possible tomorrows exist right now, and we stock the most likely versions. You can choose which one you want to live through. I pulled out my wallet, hands shaking, grabbed a $10 bill. "Give me the one where I survive, where nobody dies." The cashier scanned the newspapers on the shelf behind him, reading headlines. "Nobody dies, nobody dies." "Okay, here's one. Tomorrow you complete your delivery in Des Moines without incident. Traffic is light, weather is clear. You stop for dinner at the usual place, nothing interesting happens. $8.50. I paid, took the new newspaper, read the mundane headline. "Quiet Tuesday across Iowa. No major incidents reported." Scanned the entire paper looking for my name. Wasn't mentioned anywhere. So I'm safe now? I won't die at mile marker 412? You've purchased that timeline, so yes, you'll experience that version of tomorrow instead of the death timeline. As long as you don't exchange the newspaper again or buy a different tomorrow somewhere else. Somewhere else? There are other truck stops that sell tomorrow? Sure. 3 more on I-80 in Iowa alone, plus locations in Nebraska, Illinois, Missouri. We're part of a chain. Tomorrow shops. You haven't seen our signs? Big yellow billboards with a clock face showing 24 hours ahead. I hadn't seen those signs, never noticed them despite driving I-80 hundreds of times. But now that he mentioned it, I had a vague memory of yellow billboards. Something about time. Something I'd always skimmed past without really processing. What happens if I don't buy a tomorrow? If I just drive without purchasing a timeline? Then you get the default tomorrow, the most likely version. Usually that's fine, but sometimes the default includes accidents, delays, bad luck. People who shop here regularly avoid a lot of problems by buying good tomorrows. I looked around the convenience store with new awareness. Half the products were normal, chips, sodas, coffee, but the other half were impossible. Future products that didn't exist yet. Magazines dated for next month, a freezer full of ice cream in flavors that hadn't been invented. Quantum chocolate, temporal strawberry, probability vanilla. How long has this place been selling tomorrow? Always, the cashier said, since it was built in 1987 or 1995 or 2003, depends which timeline you ask. The building exists in multiple time periods simultaneously. That's why we can stock tomorrow. We're connected to time periods where tomorrow has already happened and is available for distribution. I grabbed my Purchase Tomorrow newspaper and walked out, feeling reality tilt around me. Got back in my truck, sat in the cab, tried to process what I'd just learned. Tomorrow was for sale. Multiple versions of it, and I'd just purchased one where I survived the day. But questions nagged at me. If I could buy tomorrow, could other people buy it too? Could they purchase versions of tomorrow where I died despite me purchasing survival? Could we buy contradictory tomorrows and create temporal paradoxes? I drove east on I-80 watching for mile marker 412, the location of my death in the original timeline I'd purchased and exchanged. As I approached, I felt intense anxiety. What if the exchange hadn't worked? What if I was still on the death timeline despite buying a different newspaper? Mile marker 410. I slowed to 55 miles per hour, hyper alert, watching for anything that might cause me to swerve. Mile marker 411. Nothing unusual. Traffic was light, weather clear, exactly as my Purchase Tomorrow had promised. Mile marker 412. I saw the overpass, the support column I would have hit, drove past it safely, no accident, no swerve, nothing. I'd successfully avoided the original tomorrow by purchasing a different one. I stopped at a rest area and examined the newspaper more carefully. Read through every article looking for any mentions of consequences or side effects of buying tomorrow. Found a small notice on the back page. Tomorrow purchases are non-refundable and may not reflect outcomes if multiple parties purchase contradictory timelines. Tomorrow Shops LLC is not responsible for temporal paradoxes, timeline collapses, or existential inconsistencies resulting from customer purchases. Use of future-dated products at your own risk. Multiple parties purchase contradictory timelines. That was the key phrase. What if someone else had purchased a tomorrow where I died? What if my survival and my death existed in competing timelines and reality didn't know which to implement? I continued to Des Moines as my Purchase Tomorrow predicted, completed my delivery without incident, stopped for dinner at the usual place. Everything matched the newspaper's predictions perfectly. I was living through the timeline I'd purchased, experiencing a tomorrow that I'd bought for $850. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Exit 83, about the Tomorrow Shop, about all the other versions of tomorrow I hadn't purchased. In how many timelines had I died today? In how many had I survived? By buying one specific tomorrow, had I killed all the other versions of myself living in other timelines? The next day, I drove past Exit 83 again, heading westbound. The Tomorrow Shop was there, same as before. But the cashier was different, an older woman I'd never seen, but who looked at me with recognition. "Back again, Mr. Pembroke? Looking to buy another tomorrow?" "You know, my name?" "Of course. You've been a regular customer for 7 years. Buy tomorrow almost every week." "I've never been here before yesterday." She frowned, checked a computer. "According to our records, you've purchased 374 tomorrows from our Exit 83 location since 2018. Mostly survival-focused, avoiding accidents, delays, bad weather. You're one of our best customers." "That's impossible. Yesterday was my first time." "Different timeline, maybe. In this timeline, you've been shopping here for years. But if you're from a timeline where you just discovered us, then yes, yesterday was your first time in that timeline. Time is complicated, Mr. Pembroke. Multiple versions of you exist, making different choices, buying different tomorrows. I left without purchasing anything. Drove west, trying to remember if I'd ever been to the Tomorrow Shop before. Couldn't recall. But maybe I had. Maybe version of me from other timelines had been regular customers, and their purchases had affected my experiences without me knowing. Over the next month, I avoided Exit 83. Didn't want to buy tomorrow anymore. Didn't want to participate in whatever temporal marketplace was operating there. But things started going wrong. Small accidents, delays, bad luck, equipment failures that shouldn't have happened. Like reality was punishing me for not purchasing tomorrow, for trying to experience the default timeline instead of a purchased one. I broke down and returned to Exit 83. Purchased tomorrow. The accident stopped. My luck improved. I was back on a purchased timeline, experiencing a version of tomorrow that I'd selected instead of the default. And I realized I was addicted. Dependent on buying tomorrow. Unable to function properly without purchasing my next day in advance. The Tomorrow Shop had made me a customer not through advertising but through necessity. Once you'd experienced a purchase tomorrow, the default timeline felt dangerous, unpredictable, wrong. I've been buying tomorrow for 6 weeks now. Every time I pass Exit 83, I stop, I purchase, I read through the available versions and select one where I survive, where things go well, where problems are minimized. I'm spending $8.50 per day to control my future, to avoid the randomness of default reality. But I'm seeing other drivers doing the same thing. The Tomorrow Shop is always busy now. At least a dozen trucks in the parking lot at any time. Drivers inside purchasing their next 24 hours, comparing newspapers, debating which timeline to buy. We're all addicted to purchase tomorrows, all dependent on the Exit 83 Tomorrow Shop and its sister locations. All unable to face default reality anymore, and the newspapers are changing. The available tomorrows are getting worse. More accidents, more deaths, more disasters, like reality itself is degrading, becoming more dangerous, and the only safe path is through purchased timelines that cost more each week. Last week, tomorrow cost $15. This week, $22. Next week, the cashier says it'll be $30 minimum for any timeline where I survive. The Tomorrow Shop is raising prices because they can. Because we're dependent. Because we can't go back to default reality anymore. Arthur Pembroke, trucker, addicted to purchase tomorrows, paying more each week to experience a future where I survive. If you see a Tomorrow Shop at Exit 83 in Iowa, drive past. Don't stop. Don't buy tomorrow. Live with default reality, unpredictable and dangerous as it is. Because once you start purchasing tomorrow, you can't stop. And tomorrow gets more expensive every day. Eventually, you'll be unable to afford a timeline where you survive, and then, well, then you experience the default tomorrow, the one you've been avoiding, the one where everything goes wrong and you can't buy your way out. I'm driving to exit 83 now. Tomorrow costs $30 today. My survival timeline costs $30. I have exactly $28 in my wallet. I don't know what I'll do when I get there. Don't know if I can afford to survive tomorrow, but I have to try. Have to buy whatever timeline I can afford, even if it's not ideal, even if it includes problems and pain. Because the default tomorrow, the one I didn't purchase, is the timeline where I die. And I'm not ready for that tomorrow yet, even though eventually that's the only tomorrow left, the one no one can afford to avoid forever. Story 6. The CB frequency from the past. Channel 47 on my CB radio connected to truckers who'd been dead for 30 years, their voices as clear as if they were driving beside me on I-95, discussing road conditions from 1994, asking for directions to truck stops that had been demolished decades ago, warning about speed traps in locations where the police stations had been closed and torn down. And when I tried to tell them they were calling from the past, that 30 years had passed since their time, they insisted they were in the present moment, that I was the one displaced in time, and that my warnings about their futures, the accidents that would kill them, the companies that would go bankrupt, the routes that would become obsolete, only confused them until one driver, a man named Walter Price, finally believed me and asked if I could prevent his death if he knew when and where it would happen. And I said yes, I would try. And he thanked me and signed off, and the next day I found his obituary from 1995 unchanged. His death occurring exactly as history recorded despite my warning, despite my attempt at intervention, proving that the past was immutable no matter how clearly we could communicate across time. My name is Gerald Matthews, and I'd discovered Channel 47 by accident 2 weeks ago while scanning through frequencies during a long night drive through Virginia, looking for any conversation to break the monotony, any voice to keep me company through the darkness. I'd heard truckers talking about weather patterns that seemed off, discussing a snowstorm in August, complaining about road closures that didn't match any current conditions, and I'd joined the conversation asking where they were seeing snow in August, and they'd responded that it was February 1994. What was I talking about, August? And I'd realized with a chill that I was somehow hearing broadcasts from 30 years in the past. The CB shouldn't work that way. Radio waves travel at the speed of light, don't hang around in the atmosphere for 3 decades waiting to be picked up. But Channel 47 was different, operating on some frequency that cut across time rather than space, connecting present receivers to past transmitters. I'd tested it systematically over the following week, asked the 1994 truckers about specific events. Has the Oklahoma City bombing happened yet? No, they'd answered. What bombing? And confirmed they were genuinely broadcasting from early 1994, months before that event. Asked about their plans, their routes, where they'd be next week. Then searched obituaries and accident reports from 1994, 1995 and found them. 6 truckers I'd talked to on Channel 47 had died in the year following our conversations, died in crashes, heart attacks, jackknife accidents, all documented in historical records. I was talking to ghosts. Or more accurately, I was talking to people who didn't know they were about to become ghosts, listening to broadcasts from their final months of life. And I thought, maybe I can save them. Maybe I can warn them about their deaths, and they can avoid the accidents, and history can be changed. Walter Price was my test case, a 47-year-old independent trucker from Tennessee who talked about his wife and 3 kids, who drove a blue Kenworth, who had a distinctive laugh that came through the CB speakers like rolling thunder. I'd found his obituary, died July 18, 1995, in a crash on I-40 near Nashville when his steering failed and he crossed into oncoming traffic. 4 deaths total. Walter and 3 people in the car he hit. I waited until I heard Walter on Channel 47, then contacted him. Walter, this is Gerald Matthews. I need to tell you something important. You're going to die on July 18th, 1995. Your steering is going to fail near Nashville. You need to have your truck inspected, get the steering system checked, replace anything questionable. Silence on Channel 47. Then Walter's voice, confused. How do you know my name? How do you know? What kind of sick joke is this? It's not a joke. I'm broadcasting from the year 2024. I can see historical records. I know what happens to you. I know you die in 18 months unless you fix your steering. You're crazy. You're some asshole trying to freak me out. Channel 47, you hearing this guy? Someone get him off this frequency. Other 1994 truckers chimed in, telling me to stop harassing Walter, threatening to report me to... who? The FCC from 30 years ago? But I persisted, gave Walter specific details about his life that I'd found in obituary records and news articles. His wife's name, Linda, his kids, Michael, Sarah, and Jennifer, his truck's registration number. Details no prankster would know. Eventually, Walter started believing me, or at least considering the possibility. If you're really from 2024, he said, prove it. Tell me something that hasn't happened yet. I told him about the Oklahoma City bombing in April 1995. Told him about O.J. Simpson's trial. Told him about the 1996 presidential election. Enough detail that he couldn't dismiss it as guessing. Jesus, Walter whispered. You're really from the future. How is this possible? I don't know. Channel 47 connects across time somehow. But Walter, listen to me. You need to check your steering. You need to get your truck inspected. Don't wait until July. Do it now. Okay, I will. I'll take it to my mechanic tomorrow. Gerald, thank you. You might have just saved my life. I hope so. Good luck, Walter. He signed off. I waited, hoping I'd changed history, hoping Walter's obituary would disappear from the records or be rewritten to show he died of old age in 2020 or something. The next day, I searched again. Found the same obituary. Walter Price died July 18, 1995. Steering failure, 4 deaths total. Unchanged. My warning hadn't worked. Either Walter had ignored it, or he'd had his steering checked and it had failed anyway, or history was immutable and my intervention had been negated by some temporal force. I tried with other drivers, warned them about their upcoming deaths, gave them specific dates and locations, told them how to avoid the accidents that would kill them. None of it worked. Every driver I warned died exactly as history recorded. The past was written, unchangeable, and my warnings from the future were either ignored or insufficient or simply incompatible with a timeline that had already been established. But I kept trying, kept monitoring Channel 47, kept talking to truckers from 1994, kept warning them about their futures. Maybe I couldn't change history, but I could at least let them know. Could give them awareness of their mortality, their limited time, their final months. And something strange started happening. The truckers on Channel 47 started talking to me regularly. Started asking questions about the future, about what would happen to them, to their families, to the trucking industry. I became a prophet of sorts, broadcasting information from 2024 back to 1994, answering their questions as honestly as I could. Does my daughter go to college? Asked one driver. I searched her name, found her on LinkedIn. Yes, she graduates from Ohio State in 2002, becomes a pharmacist, has 2 kids of her own, she's doing great. The driver cried, thanked me for letting him know his daughter would be okay. Does the company survive? Asked another, worried about the trucking firm he worked for. I searched the company. No, sorry. They declare bankruptcy in 1998, but most of the drivers find other jobs. You personally end up working for J.B. Hunt. Better pay, better benefits. It's actually an improvement. These conversations became routine. Every night I'd tune to Channel 47, talk to truckers from 1994, answer questions about their futures. I couldn't change history, but I could give them knowledge, comfort, awareness. Then one night, a new voice appeared on Channel 47, different from the regular 1994 truckers. Older, tired, speaking with eerie precision. Gerald Matthews. This is Gerald Matthews. I'm broadcasting from 2054. I can see your future. Would you like me to tell you when and how you die? I froze. A voice from 30 years ahead doing to me what I'd been doing to the 1994 truckers. Is this real? I asked. As real as you are to the 1994 truckers. I'm on Channel 47 in the year 2054, and I can see historical records that include your obituary. Your death is recorded. Would you like to know the details? No, I said immediately. No, I don't want to know. Interesting. You've been telling 1994 truckers about their deaths without asking permission, broadcasting their futures whether they wanted to know or not. But you don't want the same information about yourself. That's different. I was trying to help them, trying to save them. And it didn't work, did it? They all died anyway. History is immutable. The past can't be changed no matter how much warning you provide. So your broadcasts were just torture, forcing people to live their final months knowing exactly when and how they'd die. I hadn't thought of it that way. Hadn't considered that my warnings might be cruel rather than helpful. But the 2054 voice was right. If history couldn't be changed, then telling someone about their upcoming death only gave them time to dread it. Why are you doing this? I asked the 2054 version of myself. Why are you on Channel 47? Same reason you are. I discovered the frequency connects across time. I'm talking to you from 30 years ahead, the same way you talk to the 1994 truckers from 30 years ahead of them. It's a chain. Infinite versions of Gerald Matthews, each one 30 years apart, all monitoring Channel 47, all talking to previous versions of ourselves. How many of us are there? I don't know. I've heard voices from 2084, 2114, 2144. The chain might extend indefinitely. Every Gerald Matthews discovers Channel 47, realizes it connects across time, and starts broadcasting to the past. We're all doing the same thing across centuries. What's the point? If we can't change history, why keep broadcasting? Because we can't. Stop. The compulsion to communicate across time is overwhelming once you've started. You'll keep talking to 1994 truckers until you die. I'll keep talking to you until I die. The chain continues because it must continue. Because Channel 47 requires it. Requires it? The radio frequency has requirements. Channel 47 isn't natural. It's a construct, something designed to connect time periods, to create this chain of communication. And once you've tapped into it, you're part of the construct. You'll broadcast until you die, and then the next Gerald Matthews will take over 30 years ahead, continuing the chain. I wanted to turn off my CB radio. Wanted to stop participating in whatever temporal construct Channel 47 represented. But I couldn't. The 2054 voice was right. The compulsion was overwhelming. I needed to monitor Channel 47, needed to talk to the 1994 truckers, needed to answer their questions even though I couldn't change their fates. That was 3 months ago. I'm still monitoring Channel 47 every night. Still talking to Walter Price and the other 1994 truckers, even though Walter died in 1995, and every conversation I have with him is from his final 18 months of life. Still answering questions about futures that can't be changed. And the 2054 Gerald Matthews still broadcasts to me occasionally, telling me things about my future that I try not to hear, try not to remember, try not to let affect my choices, even though I know history is immutable and whatever he tells me will happen exactly as he describes. Gerald Matthews, trucker, prophet of unchangeable futures. Link in an infinite chain of Gerald Matthews broadcasting across centuries, all of us trapped in the same compulsion, all of us monitoring Channel 47 because we must, because the frequency demands it, because once you've heard the voices from the past, you can never stop listening. If you find Channel 47 on your CB radio, if you hear voices discussing road conditions from decades ago, turn it off. Change frequencies. Forget you heard it, because once you start listening, you'll never stop. You'll become part of the chain, broadcasting to the past, receiving broadcasts from the future, trapped in a temporal loop that extends backwards and forwards through time until you can't remember which time period you actually inhabit. I drive, I monitor Channel 47. I talk to ghosts from 1994 and receive warnings from 2054. I answer questions and ask questions and exist between past and future, never quite present in either. The CB frequency from the past is also a frequency to the future, and once you're tuned in forever. Channel 47, the frequency that connects all time, the chain that never breaks. Listen if you dare, but know that listening means joining, and joining means forever. Forever broadcasting across time, forever part of the construct, forever unable to stop. Channel 47, still broadcasting, always broadcasting. From every time period simultaneously, forever. Story 7, the cargo that grows heavier with fear. My trailer was loaded with 43,000 pounds of lumber according to the manifest, but my truck's sensors showed the weight increasing every time I felt fear. 43,000 pounds at loading, 43,400 when I nearly missed my turn outside Portland, 40,100 after a close call with a merge. 46,800 when the check engine light flickered on then off, and by the time I'd reached the Idaho border, my cargo had somehow gained 11,000 pounds of weight directly correlated to my emotional state, the lumber feeding on anxiety and panic, metabolizing fear into physical mass that was crushing my suspension and making my Freightliner handle like it was loaded with concrete instead of wood. And when I finally worked up the courage to open the trailer and inspect the cargo, I found the lumber had changed. Was no longer pale pine boards, but dark, pulsing material that looked organic, looked alive, looked like it was waiting for me to be afraid one more time so it could grow heavy enough to collapse the trailer entirely and consume whatever remained. My name is Mitchell Rourke, and I'd been hauling construction materials for 11 years, knew lumber loads intimately, knew how they shifted and settled during transport, knew the weight distribution patterns and handling characteristics. But this load was wrong from the moment I'd picked it up at a mill outside Seattle. Something about the way the forklift operator had avoided eye contact, the way the warehouse manager had insisted I leave immediately without the standard cargo inspection, the way the lumber itself had seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I should have refused the load, should have trusted my instincts. But the rate was double the usual pay, and I'd had a slow month, and 43,000 pounds of lumber to Phoenix seemed straightforward enough despite the warning signs. The weight increase started subtly. Normal anxiety, checking mirrors, monitoring traffic, staying alert, corresponded to small jumps. 10 pounds here, 20 pounds there, amounts I dismissed as sensor errors or settling cargo. But when a deer leaped onto the highway in front of me near Spokane, forcing me to brake hard, and I felt genuine fear for the first time that trip, the spike of adrenaline, the certainty of collision, the cargo weight jumped 200 pounds in the 3 seconds it took to stop. I watched the sensor display climb, 44,000, 40,400, 40,900, 45,200. The deer bounded away unharmed. My heart rate gradually slowed. The weight stabilized at 45,200. The cargo had gained weight from my fear. I tested it, generated mild anxiety by thinking about worst-case scenarios. What if the brakes failed? What if a tire blew? What if the load shifted? Each anxious thought corresponded to a weight increase. 50 pounds for mild worry. £200 for moderate concern. When I let myself imagine a catastrophic accident, really visualized it in detail, the weight jumped 600 pounds. The cargo was literally feeding on my fear, converting emotional energy into physical mass. And it was hungry. I tried to stay calm. Focused on breathing, on staying relaxed, on not letting anxiety spike. But driving inherently generates stress, traffic, weather, fatigue, mechanical concerns. Every normal trucking challenge caused fear, and every fear caused weight gain. And I watched helplessly as the cargo climbed past 50,000 pounds, past 55,000, approaching the legal maximum of 60,000 for a loaded truck. Stay calm, I whispered to myself. Nothing to be afraid of, just lumber, just cargo, it can't hurt you. But I didn't believe that anymore. The weight gain was too consistent, too responsive, too clearly connected to my emotional state. The cargo was alive in some way, aware of me, feeding on my fear like a parasite. By Idaho, I was at 58,600 pounds, dangerously close to legal limits. I had two choices: pull over and call for help, admitting I was transporting something impossible and probably losing my truck and my career, or continue to Phoenix and hope I could deliver before the weight exceeded safety margins. I chose to continue, and immediately regretted it as fear of the choice itself generated another 400-pound spike. 59,000 pounds, 1,000 pounds from legal maximum, and I still had 800 miles to go. I pulled into a truck stop outside Boise, parked, and sat in my cab trying to generate calm. Meditation, breathing exercises, anything to keep the weight from increasing further. It worked temporarily, the weight stabilized. But the moment I started thinking about the road ahead, about the remaining distance, about what would happen if I exceeded 60,000 pounds, the anxiety returned and brought 300 more pounds with it. 59 of 300 pounds. I had to inspect the cargo, had to see what was happening in that trailer, had to understand what I was hauling. I walked to the trailer's rear doors, hands shaking. Broke the seal, which immediately generated fear of consequences, adding 200 pounds, and opened the doors. The lumber had changed. What should have been standard dimensional lumber, 2x4s, 2x6s, construction-grade pine, was now dark, mottled material that looked vaguely wood-like but had organic qualities. Veins running through it, texture that seemed to pulse, surfaces that appeared wet despite being in a dry trailer. And it had grown. The stacks were taller than when loaded, pressing against the trailer's ceiling, expanding to fill available space. The cargo wasn't just gaining weight, it was gaining volume, metabolizing my fear into both mass and matter. I touched one of the boards. It was warm, body temperature warm, and when I pulled my hand away, a thin strand of the material came with it, stretching between my palm and the lumber like spider silk or mucus. I jerked away, disgusted, and the fear of contact generated another spike. 59,600 pounds. I slammed the trailer doors and ran back to my cab. Had to get rid of this load, had to refuse delivery, had to stop transporting whatever this was before it grew so heavy it collapsed my truck or so large it broke through the trailer walls. But when I tried to start the engine to drive away and abandon the load, my hands wouldn't cooperate. Fear of abandonment, fear of consequences, fear of whatever would happen if I didn't complete the delivery. All of it paralyzed me, and all of it fed the cargo. 60,000 pounds, legal maximum reached. The trailer groaned under the weight. My suspension was compressed to its limit. My tires looked overinflated, ready to burst. The truck was being crushed by cargo that continued to grow. My CB radio crackled. Driver of the Freightliner with Oregon plates, this is Idaho State Police. Your truck is displaying overweight readings on our remote sensors. Pull into the next way station immediately. The fear that command generated pushed me past legal maximum, 6,400 pounds. I was now operating an overweight vehicle subject to fines and impound. And more importantly, I was carrying cargo that wouldn't stop growing as long as I kept experiencing fear. I tried to think calming thoughts, tried to meditate, to relax, to generate emotions other than fear. But it's impossible to will yourself not to be afraid when you know your fear is making the situation worse, when you know every spike of anxiety adds weight that brings you closer to mechanical failure. 60,900 pounds. My rear tires were smoking now, friction from excessive weight generating heat. They'd blow soon, or the axles would break, or the trailer's frame would crack, and when that happened, I'd be stranded with a cargo that would keep growing, keep feeding, until it consumed the truck entirely. I made a decision, the only decision that might work. I had to eliminate the fear by eliminating the unknown. Had to climb into the trailer, confront the cargo directly, understand what it was and what it wanted. Fear thrives on uncertainty. Direct knowledge might reduce it. I stopped on the shoulder, emergency flashers on, and walked to the trailer. Opened the doors again. Small fear spike, 61,100 pounds now, and climbed inside. The lumber had filled the entire cargo space. What should have been walkable aisles between stacks was now solid mass, the organic wood material pressed against all surfaces. I was standing in what felt like a stomach, a digestive chamber surrounded by pulsing walls that radiated warmth, and I heard it. A voice, or something like a voice, emanating from the cargo itself. Thank you for feeding me. Thank you for the fear. I was dormant in the mill, starving, waiting for a carrier who could nourish me. You've given me strength, given me mass. Soon I'll have enough weight to break free, to escape this trailer, to find new sources of fear to consume. What are you? I asked aloud. I'm what grows when terror is concentrated. When enough people have been afraid in the same location, a mill where workers feared losing fingers to saws, feared falling from heights, feared crushing injuries, that concentrated fear crystallizes, becomes material, becomes me. I was lumber once, but decades of fear from mill workers transformed me, made me hungry, and you're feeding me with every anxious thought. How do I stop it? How do I stop the weight gain? You don't. Fear is involuntary. You can't control it, not really. The more you try to suppress it, the more it builds and the more I grow. By the time you reach Phoenix, I'll weigh over 100,000 pounds. Your truck will collapse, and I'll break free, spread, find new sources of fear to absorb and metabolize. You're my transportation and my food source. Thank you for both. I backed out of the trailer, terror spiking to new levels. 62 to 300 pounds. The rear axles buckled. I heard the metal fail, heard the trailer drop 3 inches as the suspension collapsed. My truck was breaking under the weight of cargo that had grown from 43,000 pounds to over 62,000 in less than 500 miles. I ran to my cab, climbed in, tried to drive on the broken axles. The truck moved maybe 50 feet before the frame cracked. I felt the separation, felt the trailer become a dead weight dragging behind me, and I knew the truck was finished. The cargo had won. I grabbed my essentials and abandoned the truck on the Idaho shoulder. Walked away as fast as I could while calling 911 to report a disabled vehicle. Watched from a quarter-mile distance as emergency services arrived. Watched them inspect the trailer, open the doors, examine the cargo. They seemed confused. Their instruments showed severe overweight, but the cargo appeared to be normal lumber, nothing unusual, no explanation for the excess mass. They closed up the trailer and called for a heavy-duty wrecker to transport it. I watched them load my broken truck and its growing cargo onto a flatbed. Watched them drive away toward an impound lot where the cargo would wait, would starve without a fear source, would eventually go dormant again until another driver came along and fed it. But I'm still connected to it, can still feel it in my mind, a presence that knows me, remembers me, wants me to come back and feed it more fear. Every time I experience anxiety, every time fear spikes, I feel the cargo responding even though it's 200 miles away in an impound lot. Feel it growing heavier, gaining mass, preparing for the day when it finds another carrier. Mitchell Rourke, former trucker. Current fear source for cargo that shouldn't exist. Feeding a parasitic organism with my anxiety even though we're no longer in proximity. If you're offered a lumber haul from a Seattle mill, if the pay seems too good, if the lumber looks darker than it should, refuse the load. Because the cargo that grows heavier with fear never stops growing, never stops feeding, never stops hunting for carriers who can nourish it with terror. And once it's fed on you, once it's tasted your fear, it never fully lets go. You'll feed it forever from any distance for the rest of your life. I'm feeding it now. Every word of this story generates anxiety, and that anxiety crosses the distance to the impound lot where the cargo waits. 63,000 pounds now, still growing, still hungry, always hungry forever. Story 8. The rest area that loops in space. The rest area appeared exactly 47 miles after I left it. Same picnic tables and vending machines and restroom building. Same cracked pavement in the parking area. Same positioning of trees around the perimeter. And I knew it was the same rest area because I'd carved my initials in a specific picnic table 30 minutes ago, and those initials were still there when I arrived at what should have been a different location, proving that either I'd somehow driven in a circle despite maintaining perfectly straight highway travel, or the rest area itself was moving, repositioning ahead of me. Or most disturbing, space had folded and the distance between the rest area's location and any point 47 miles away had become zero, creating a loop where leaving and arriving were the same action, and I was trapped driving infinitely between departure and arrival at a rest area that existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. My name is Douglas Kerr, and I'd stopped at a rest area on Highway 50 through Nevada around 2 a.m., needing coffee and a break after 6 hours of straight driving. Typical rest area, no fuel service, just parking, restrooms, picnic area, vending machines, maybe 8 other trucks in the lot. I'd used the bathroom, bought coffee, sat at a picnic table to rest for 20 minutes. On impulse, I'd taken my keys and carved my initials, DK, into the wooden surface of the table. Small vandalism, nothing significant, just marking my presence in a forgettable location. Then I'd gotten back in my truck and continued west on Highway 50. 47 miles later, I saw the rest area again. Same design, same layout. I almost didn't stop. Lots of rest areas look similar, but something nagged at me. The trees were positioned exactly the same. The crack in the pavement ran through the parking area in the same pattern. I pulled in and checked the picnic table where I'd carved my initials. DK. Fresh carving. Still there. I was back at the same rest area despite driving 47 miles west in a straight line on a highway with no curves, no turnabouts, no way to accidentally loop back. I grabbed my GPS, checked my position. It showed me 47 miles west of where I'd started. The coordinates were different, but the rest area was identical, including my fresh initials in the table. I got back in my truck and continued west immediately. No break this time. Watched my odometer carefully, drove exactly 47 miles. The rest area appeared again. Same position on the highway, same everything. I stopped and checked the picnic table. DK carved into the wood. But this time there were 2 sets of initials. My original carving and a second carving directly below it. Same DK, same style carved by me 30 minutes ago when I'd stopped the second time. 2 visits, 2 initial carvings, same table. I drove 47 miles west again. The rest area appeared. 3 sets of DK initials now stacked vertically on the table. The rest area was looping. Every 47 miles of travel brought me back to it, or it brought itself to me, and each visit layered on top of previous visits, accumulating evidence of my repeated arrivals. I tried turning around, driving east instead of west, drove 47 miles east. The rest area appeared on the eastbound side, Checked the table. 3 sets of DK initials plus a 4th I'd just carved. Distance didn't matter. Direction didn't matter. Every 47 miles of travel in any direction terminated at this rest area. Space had been folded somehow, bent back on itself, and this rest area was the fold point. I tried getting off Highway 50, took a side road heading north, drove 47 miles through empty Nevada desert, found a rest area on the side road, same design, same layout, same picnic table with 4 sets of DK initials. Every 47-mile journey ended at the same rest area regardless of direction or route. I was trapped in a spatial loop centered on this location. I examined the rest area more carefully, looking for explanations. Found a plaque near the restroom building. Nevada State Rest Area Number 7, dedicated 1963, maintained by the Department of Transportation. Over 60 years ago. This rest area had been here long enough to accumulate decades of wear and use. But it looked maintained, clean, functional. And checking my records, I found something disturbing. I'd stopped at Nevada State Rest Area Number 7 multiple times over my 15 years of driving Highway 50. Always found it in different locations, sometimes near mile marker 100, sometimes near 200, sometimes near 300. I'd assumed they were different rest areas with similar designs. But they were all the same rest area. It moved, repositioned itself along Highway 50, appearing to different drivers in different locations, creating the illusion of a network of rest areas when in reality there was only one existing simultaneously at multiple points. And now it had trapped me, locked me into a 47-mile loop I couldn't escape. I tried to wait it out, parked in the rest area, slept in my cab, refused to drive. Thought maybe the loop would time out, would release me if I stayed stationary long enough. But after 6 hours, other trucks started arriving. Drivers I'd seen during my loop, same trucks, same people, arriving at what they thought was a normal rest area. I approached one driver, tried to explain the situation. This rest area loops, I told him. If you drive 47 miles in any direction, you'll end up back here. That's impossible, he said. Rest areas don't loop. You've been driving too long, man. Get some real sleep. He didn't believe me. Drove away, heading west. I waited. 47 minutes later, the time it took to drive 47 miles at 60 mph, he returned, pulling into the rest area with a confused expression. "What the hell?" he said, getting out of his truck. "I drove almost 50 miles. How am I back here?" "I told you, the rest area loops. We're trapped." More drivers arrived over the next few hours. All of them had left the rest area going various directions. All of them returned after traveling 47 miles. By evening, there were 17 trucks trapped in the loop, 17 drivers trying to understand the spatial anomaly that had captured us. One driver suggested we all leave simultaneously, driving in different directions, testing whether the loop could handle multiple vehicles. We tried it. Synchronized departure, 17 trucks heading out in a coordinated pattern. 47 miles later, all 17 of us arrived back at the rest area from different directions simultaneously, creating a traffic nightmare as we all tried to re-enter the parking area at once. The loop was absolute. 17 trucks, 17 different routes, all terminating at the same rest area. We held a meeting. 17 drivers sitting at picnic tables trying to problem-solve our way out of a spatial impossibility. Ideas ranged from practical, call authorities, request helicopter evacuation, to absurd. Maybe if we drive backwards, maybe if we close our eyes while driving, maybe if we go exactly 46.9 miles instead of 47. None of it worked. Cell phones had no signal. CB radios only reached other drivers in the loop, all of us calling each other from the same parking lot despite believing we were in different locations. And any attempt to travel any distance in any direction brought us back after 47 miles. Then one driver noticed something. The picnic table with my initials now had 17 sets of DK carved into it, one for each trip I'd made through the loop. But the wood wasn't thick enough to accommodate 17 carvings. They should have overlapped, carved through each other. Instead, they stacked vertically in a column that was physically impossible given the table's dimensions. The rest area exists in multiple dimensions, he said. We're not just looping spatially, we're looping dimensionally. Each time we arrive, we're arriving in a slightly different dimensional layer of the same location. That's why your initial stack, instead of overlapping, each carving exists in a different dimension, and we're seeing all dimensions simultaneously. So we're trapped in multi-dimensional space? Another driver asked. More like we're trapped at a multi-dimensional anchor point. This rest area exists in all dimensions at once. It's a junction, and we've all been pulled to it, stuck at the junction, unable to move away because distance is meaningless here. Every point in space is 47 miles from this rest area. We're always 47 miles away no matter where we try to go. The explanation didn't help us escape. 17 drivers trapped at a dimensional junction, unable to travel more than 47 miles from our prison, returning constantly to the same parking lot where we'd all become stuck. We've been here for 6 weeks now. More drivers have joined us. 32 trucks trapped in the loop now. Some have tried walking away from the rest area on foot. They make it 47 miles before the rest area appears ahead of them, regardless of terrain or obstacles. One driver tried flying, arranged for a helicopter pickup, flew 47 miles in a straight line, and found himself descending toward the rest area again. The loop is perfect, inescapable. We exist at a point in space that's connected to every other point, all of them exactly 47 miles away, all paths leading back to rest area number 7. We've organized ourselves, divided duties. Some drivers maintain the facilities. Some try to devise escape plans. Some have given up, accepted this is permanent, started calling the rest area home. I'm still trying to escape, still driving 47 miles in random directions, hoping to find a variance, a glitch, a way out. But every journey ends the same way. Arrival at the rest area, another set of initials carved in the table, another layer of dimensional imprisonment. Douglas Kerr, trucker, trapped at Nevada State Rest Area number 7, driving infinite 47-mile journeys that all terminate at the same point. Unable to leave, unable to reach any destination except this one. If you're driving Highway 50 through Nevada, if you see Rest Area number 7, drive past. Don't stop. Don't let it catch you in its dimensional loop, because once you're in the loop, the rest area becomes every point in space simultaneously. Becomes your horizon, your destination, your origin. You drive forever, traveling infinite miles, never getting anywhere except back to where you started. The rest area that loops in space doesn't just trap your vehicle. It traps your concept of distance, your understanding of location, your ability to move through the world. We're all here now, 32 drivers and counting. All of us marking time by the trips we make, the 47-mile journeys that go nowhere, the returns that never end. The picnic table has hundreds of carvings now, DK stacked in an impossible column that extends through dimensions, marking my failed escape attempts, proving that I've been trying to leave for eternity without ever moving an inch. Rest area number 7, the point that connects all points, the location that exists everywhere, the loop that never breaks. We're still here, still driving 47 miles, still arriving. Forever.